James Bond and Greek mythology. It sounds like, and it sounds like there's a lot of kind of problem solving, puzzle doing involved. And I assume these are all team games, right? So you have like two teams pitted against each other, or is it just one big team trying to solve it?
We have games that fall in each of those categories that you described, but the case game that I just mentioned is designed for a team of up to 10 participants. Now, we can have multiple units being run simultaneously. In some instances, we've had as many as 12 of them running simultaneously for a group of 120. We've also provided games for groups as large as 650 people to play simultaneously.
Wow. Okay.
That game happens to, again, it's an abstraction from these notions, but really the game is grounded in the concepts of strategy, negotiation, conflict resolution, with an overarching theme of empathy based on simple game theory principles, whereby sometimes the best outcome is achieved by collaborating with people who seemingly have separate agendas.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Have you ever done like a Thunderdome type game where you have two men enter, one man leaves, like just combat?
Not with this company.
Right. Maybe a different company, a different time and place. Anyway, so now you wrote a piece about this, and that's how I learned about it. And you break down onboarding into a few different parts or elements, maybe, and one of them is company culture, right? Which makes sense. That's the whole point of part of the point of onboarding, introduce people to the company culture. So how do these games help address that element of onboarding?
Well, when we get into a programmatic client situation of the sort that you're describing, we consider the areas that can be customized within the game. And we would want to gain a good understanding of what points of emphasis associated with company culture we should be considerate of, and then we can go about tailoring the content of the game for that sort of programmatic consideration. I mean, in general, the games are made to be broadly applicable, and that broad application calls out the things that we know to be most important in the minds of most folks who are conducting these training sessions, whether it's onboarding or otherwise. But if we have a client who says, I really want to incorporate these games into an ongoing program, and there are specific themes that are critical for emphasis, we can then factor those into the game content to make sure that those come to the surface and are part of the key messages that are conveyed and taken away from the game.
Okay. And it would seem like these games are a really good way to get to know the people that you're playing the game with. And if it's onboarding, everyone's new. You don't really know each other. And it would seem like this is probably a pretty good bonding activity.
It is. That is one of the goals that we design games to accomplish in terms of, fostering a sense of camaraderie and familiarity where bonds can be strengthened. It's not at all unusual. In fact, it is almost always the case, if without exception, that people are energized during the games. I think that's just a function of it being a game in and of itself, but also just a function of the way that we've created them to achieve that emotional reaction. But that energy spills over to post-game discussion. Over the course of the game experience, we've created them in a fashion where there's an opportunity to celebrate small victories. And that celebration builds over the course of the game and really leads to conversation afterward within a group, among various groups. We could have done this differently. How did you guys go about doing that? How did you think about doing this? How did you solve that problem? Maybe we could have eliminated some of the time that we spent if we had approached it this way or that way. But, the mix of reaction or comments that we've been able to achieve includes laughter, includes celebration, encouragement, and the sort of observation that I described that can then spill over into everyday work life, and especially with an emphasis on a given cultural environment for the sake of the onboarding process when the games are used for that purpose.
So now I would imagine that, or I would think that these kind of games can walk kind of a fine line between coming across as fun and engaging and relevant and on the other hand is maybe silly or kind of a waste of time. So how do you make sure that the game doesn't cross over to that sort of silly side of the line?
Well, I think it starts with just the caliber of team we have developing these games. I mean, these are highly credentialed professionals, PhDs from leading schools. We've got a good contingent from Columbia University, that background, who we work with. Our professional game designers being very mindful of that balance. And it comes back to our architecture, whereby we use the moniker Games with Purpose as a subtitle oftentimes. And we want the games to represent more than just an icebreaker, more than just a fun diversion whereby people just return to dry subject matter afterwards.
So let's break it down a little bit. We've covered a lot of interesting ground. What's the main thing you want our listeners to take away from our discussion?
The main thing is that the games really can be thought of as a valuable solution or tool in amplifying the benefits of any program that might be part of a learning and development initiative, whether it's onboarding or ongoing training or leadership development. The range of participants of these games is, young adults who are starting their first job to C-suite executives at Fortune 500 companies. And what we've found is that the benefits can vary depending upon who the audience is, who the participants are. But the common ground with respect to benefits are some of the things that we've talked about from the point of view of a greater appreciation for how a group can work most effectively together, a greater appreciation for a subject matter that is included as a point of emphasis within the game, and a stronger bonding among the participants. So, the games in and of themselves can be thought of as a solution, but we think that they're most powerful when they are used as a key ingredient and perhaps even a keystone to an overarching program.
Okay, very good. So, Brett, how can people connect with you?
They can visit our website, which is vitalityteaming.com. And there are case studies and a more comprehensive description of some of the games that we offer and the mindset behind them, and even some of the science that underpins the games. And we will be delighted to hear from folks. We welcome suggestions as to how games that we might design can address specific needs. And obviously, to the extent that we have opportunities to talk with folks about helping support the achievement of their goals, we really appreciate that.
Okay, very good. And I'll put links to your website. I'll put a link, I should say, to your website on our podcast page. And I encourage listeners to check out the website. There's a lot of really interesting stuff there, a lot of good information. So, Brad, thank you so much for spending time with us and for sharing all these great ideas.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
That does it for this episode of the Sales Training and Coaching Podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, or you can find us on the podcast app on your phone. If you're a coach or trainer and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if there's a topic you'd like to hear about, let us know. You can contact me at jeremy@tribknowledge.com. That's TRIB knowledge.com. Thanks for listening.